thinking about, when I give my lessons, I don't really do diagrams for up and down and various things, because strum patterns, I think, are, I don't know, for me anyway, it's a real organic thing. And the way I learned about strumming, and this is not, we're not talking about finger picking right now. We're talking about strumming. And by the way, sometimes I strum with a pick. And we could dissect that a million different ways. What gauge pick and thumb picks versus a flat pick. But in general, a pick is like an amplifier. It really gets a lot louder when you pick it. When you introduce a plectrum, as it were. It's quite a dynamic thing. But in terms of the rhythm itself, the up and the down and all that, it is so proprietary to the player. It's so indicative of how you want to strike and dynamically hit the strings. We talk a little bit in some of my lessons. When I first started teaching, I thought, how can I express what happens on the guitar for me? And I came up with the 4 T's, and this is not totally original. This is something that's been talked about for a while, I think. But touch, tone, time, and taste, touch. The touch could be the way you hit the string. You hear something from the guitar player has a great touch, or he's a touch player. I've heard that said, The way you strike the string. Or you want more jazzy, it makes a difference. Where you hit it, how you hit it. You hit it down here. Way different than a kind of a... But today I want to talk more about why I don't give diagrams when I'm explaining a song. What I actually would rather do is I just do a show and tell. So I think sometimes when we try to diagram stuff out, I'm only speaking for myself now, everybody's different, it kind of takes the spontaneity out of it, or the feel, the organic feel out of it. So what I do rather than that is I try to the best of my ability, if I'm showing, for instance, a G strum, right, like what I'll sometimes do is just to illustrate what I'm doing with my right hand, I'll just mute my left hand and give you and I might say down, down, up, down, but I don't even do that often, because everybody's going to feel it differently. So to me, it's not something that's written in stone in terms of, I think strumming is a big part of your personality as a player, okay? How you choose to feel something or play something is not playing exactly like, Cat Stevens or John Mellencamp did, It's how you want to feel it and do it. And I think that ultimately, as guitarists and musicians in general, we want to find our search for our own authentic, true voice is kind of the point of it all. Because it's nice to study the masters, and I thoroughly encourage it. That's a lot of what we do here. But eventually we want, like John Lee Hooker told me when I recorded with him, he said, you got to be you, he's like, I do the hell out of John Lee Hooker. And I was like, well said. He's a guy that had what he had, and he made the most of it. So back to the strumming, if you're someone that wants to get, if you're playing a song and you want it to be big and you want it to be bright, obviously you're gonna go after it, right? Now, if you wanna come down and be more delicate with it, you're gonna play maybe a little bit more over the sound hole, or even towards the neck. That's part of the magic of guitar, right? You can do all that stuff. So that's kind of my thinking in terms of, especially if I'm teaching a song, whether it's my song or a Neil Young song. Quite often I'll try to explain how to dampen the strings, how to mute the strings, because I find that, especially on acoustic guitar, that's a big part of how we express dynamics in our playing. So like in Heart of Gold, like that. So I started out muting it, right? And I let it ring at the end. And then, you know, people I've played with over the years, I've noticed, and you probably noticed this too, especially songwriters that work with acoustic guitar, but not just acoustic, electric as well. They seem to have their own kind of almost like signature way of strumming. I don't know if you've noticed that, but I was fortunate enough to play with Bob Dillon. We've talked a little bit about this back in '93. I did a show with him, and I've since studied his stuff. You know, standing next to him, watching him play, I was like, whoa, I'm really seeing his. He kind of had this just sort of free, kind of not perfect, but really going after almost like it's like he's not being too careful with it, right? And I got something out of that. I think I learned something that day when I was playing with him. And the same thing goes for someone like Keith Richards, who, you know, ultimately I think is sort of a consummate rhythm player. He's not big on leads, although he's done some wicked, you know, Sympathy for the Devil and stuff over the years. He's more, somebody expressed Keith's playing to me as, you know, he may not be the flashiest guitar player or the most technical, but he's the only guy I know that can bend steel girders with his rhythm playing. And I'm like, yeah, well said. And the reason he's so deliberate about his rhythm, you know, when he's doing something like, you know, there's a reason that those voicings and that attack is so like gets you, because there's all that space in there. So whether it's an acoustic thing, which again I'll give an example of another thing that I get into, I like to do is called hybrid picking. Is where we're playing along maybe a light. You might even get into mix a little finger picking with the pick. I'll do that as well. Now, another thing I noticed, and I'm not dropping names here, although it might seem like I am, but I had the good fortune to do a bunch of shows with Carlos Santana and Cindy Santana, his wife, incredibly talented drummer. She was with Lenny Kravitz for years. So we did some shows, and I got to like really get up close. And I got a bunch of video from what we did together. We're gonna throw up on my channel one of these days. But what I noticed about him is, and we talked about it at length, he doesn't, you probably know this about Carlos, or maybe you don't, he prefers going straight into an amp, no pedals. The only pedal he does like to use is a wah-wah pedal eventually, you know, for certain things, but quite often not. And he'll just go straight in, wah-wah off. What I did notice he did do is he would go from using his pick to playing, which he most of the time does, and then he'll do a thing which you've probably seen people do. He'll cup the pick, you know, like this, and he'll just grab the pick in his fingers like this and play with just his thumb. And boy, what a difference. Like you're playing like something like, and then all of a sudden you get just your, cup it and then play with just my thumb. And boy, I'll tell you, the dynamic change is just crazy. And if you start getting really wild with your thumb, you can't get that sound. When you use a pick, it sounds like this. It's fine, but it doesn't have that. This guy named, what was his name? Oscar Castro Neves. He's no longer with us. He played on Black Orpheus, great Brazilian player. But I noticed we did a show down in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico, the International Jazz Fest. And I got to watch him play up close and talk to him backstage. Beautiful man, incredible player. And he would end songs sometimes. He would take his first finger and just, I mean, talk about dynamics, right? That's a long ways from so I guess my point is that the way we approach our strum, as it were, whether it's finger picking or like I said, hybrid picking, where you're Nashville, the guys and gals, they do a thumb pick with these two fingers. That's a really classic thing. What I like to do is, and this is, kind of taking it deeper, is I do almost like a claw hammer. I like to pinch like 5 strings at a time or 4 strings at a time. I like that sound. So all those are different ways to strum. One thing I learned from Clapton was, and I think he got from the old blues guys, was he would do a blues like in A, and he would do this thing where he, like this. And he talks, actually, I saw a YouTube clip on him, and this changed my style too. He likes a little bit of nail and a little bit of skin. Not too much nail, which I have to bust myself on. I've done at times. Got excited to have fingernails, right? And when you're doing the Knopfler stuff, that comes in handy. But in general, and I've noticed this in our teaching, is I kind of favor now a little bit of nail and a little bit of skin. Guys like Derek Trucks, all skin. And I know a whole bunch of guys like that. I can't think of one. There's another guy that used to play with Paul McCartney and Wings, and he's a phenomenal instrumental player. And he plays just with the skin. And what happens, ironically, is your fingers get little calluses on them. So you got calluses on this hand and this hand. But ultimately, especially, I don't have a slide with me, but with Derek Trucks, he gets that, great tonal quality that you can only get from the skin. So all these are choices that we make as players, and I don't think any one way is right or wrong. But to go back to the beginning of where we started this conversation, when I'm teaching, I have you just watch what I'm doing. And I figure if you can play along with me, whatever the pattern is, whether it's down, down, up, down, doesn't really matter. You're going to end up doing it your own way anyway. Whether you strum along so there's room for all that. There's room for the hybrid picking, for the the strum and drang stuff. There's room for the real bright. These are all the colors that we have in our palette as guitarists and as musicians. So I would encourage you to, if you're working with me on my stuff, the stuff I'm teaching, I'd love to hear back from you and hear what you got to say about this stuff, what your experience is with it. But for me, I'm more of a show and tell kind of guy, obviously. I'm not necessarily a read patterns from a piece of paper, and I have nothing against that. I think it's super valuable, whether it's reading music or reading tab or any of that stuff. My buddy Jason, he really enjoys kind of the theoretical style part of music. I think that fascinates him because at the end of the day, it is mathematical. But the way we got this conversation started, and we were just talking, he says, "Hey, why don't you show us why you don't teach necessarily written patterns in terms of strum?" Because to me, it's a feel. That's a feel. I can only learn it from watching and listening. And it's like James Brown said, man, the guitar is a drum, the bass is a drum, the horn is a drum. It's all. So that's my short but spectacular thoughts on strumming, and I hope that helps you some, and I hope that explains maybe a little bit of why I teach the way I do, especially in terms of strumming, and not just strumming, but even the other way, the left hand stuff, the fingering. I kind of leave it a little bit loose and colorful because I want to leave it open to interpretation so that you can do your own version of it. So that's it for today. We'll see you down the road. Thanks.